Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome. This is Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show at 77 WABC, the crown jewel of AM radio. For the next 2 hours until 6 p.m. Eastern, we'll be talking news, politics, history, politics, style, politics, food. Oh, did I mention politics? It's all right here. The Roger Stone Show, the place for politics. I'm very excited about the fact that it's Memorial Day weekend. For me, that means I can break out the seersucker, break out the madras, break out my two-tone shoes, they call them spectators, break out the white bucks. Sartorially, it's my favorite part of the year. My friend Mike Crispy, who does a great show at Rumble, Mike Crispy Unafraid, he was wearing seersucker a week ago. Now, I understand it was 90 degrees, but, well, I had to chastise him. Rules are rules. And seersucker is really only good between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So the season is about to begin. Seersucker, interestingly, the word comes from an Indian word describing a fabric that was in stripes, as you know, brown and white, gray and white, light blue and white, but originally brown and white. It was called sugar and cream. That was the actual translation of the word that has been bastardized now to the word seersucker. I always loved the way that Gregory Peck wore a three-piece seersucker suit with a vest in To Kill a Mockingbird. Never been able to find one of those, but given that it's seersucker because of the summer heat, I wondered how comfortable that would be. Look, I'm a veteran of 13 national presidential campaigns, starting with Richard Nixon, of course, for the great Ronald Reagan. Proud to have worked for Senator Bob Dole, one of the greatest Americans of the century. Put my time in on the Bush recount in 2000. And of course, one of the earliest people in the country to urge Donald Trump to run for president. It was back in 1979 when I was assigned New York State in the Trump campaign. I managed to wangle an appointment with Donald Trump through the controversial lawyer Roy Cohn, who represented Trump. You can make liberals' mouths foam even today just by mentioning that name. But it was through Cohn that I was able to get an appointment with real estate tycoon Donald Trump. I remember it like it was yesterday. These were the days before Trump Tower. I was ushered into Mr. Trump's office by Norma Federer, his longtime personal assistant, who would later become a great friend of mine. And she said, look, the president, Mr. Trump, pardon me, is very busy. He's going to give you about 15 minutes. So state your business, get in and get out. I thought that was the way it was going to go, but it really wasn't. Donald Trump was far more interested in politics than I thought. And for 2 hours, he bombarded me with questions about my candidate, Ronald Reagan. First thing he said to me was, I wondered when you were going to show up. I said, pardon me? He said, well, they've all been here to see me. I mean, Howard Baker, the Senate Minority Leader, George Bush, the former UN ambassador, Congressman John Anderson. There's a name that is lost to history. And I was wondering when somebody would show up representing Ronald Reagan. So he fired questions at me. We were there for almost 2 hours. Can Reagan still carry California? What about the Iowa caucuses? What about the New Hampshire primary? And then at the end of it, he said to me, you know what? Your man is going to win. I said, why do you say that? And he said, well, because he has the look. You see, in the television age, you have to have the look. And then he said something very interesting. He said, I have the look, but then I'm not interested in running for president. That would certainly change. Yes, he did join Reagan's finance committee. He and his father, Fred Trump, raised $200,000. And in 1979, $200,000 was a lot of money. Trump, as a man, having known him now for 45 years, he hates it when I say that because he says it makes both of us sound old. He really is a phenomena. He's a force of nature and an unstoppable force indeed. He may be perhaps the toughest and most stubborn person I've ever met. In this case, I use the description of him as stubborn as a positive. What I mean by it is that once he decides on a goal, once he decides on something he wants to do, he is not going to be dissuaded. Take, for example, the Paris Climate Accord. This was an international agreement to cut greenhouse gas emissions. Would have cost the United States $365 million a year. But Donald Trump found out that the Chinese, who are widely recognized as the largest polluters on the face of the planet, well, they would pay nothing. Trump said throughout the campaign he would withdraw us from the U.S. He would withdraw the U.S. from the Paris Climate Accords. And of course, once he became president, well, the bureaucrats over at the State Department said, well, Mr. President, that was great campaign rhetoric. We understand that you were just saying that, to get votes and get elected, but you can't really do that. And of course, he did exactly that. Then there was the Iranian arms deal where we were paying the Iranians hundreds of millions of dollars to theoretically put their nuclear weapons development program on hold. Turns out that there was a lot of side cash in that deal, pallets of cash that were not included in the actual formal agreement between our country and the state of Iran. I guess those pallets of cash were to pay off politicians. So 2 examples of Donald Trump being an incredibly tough guy who is always will stick to his guns. I actually first met him and I had never thought of him in political terms, but I began doing so around 1988 when we were sitting in his office. He was looking at the newspaper and he said, wow, George Bush and Mike Dukakis, is that really the best we can do? I said, no, sir, there is somebody actually much better. He said, who's that? We should get behind them. I said, well, I was thinking about you. And he said, and I quote, you're out of your mind. I said, no, not at all. You have very strong feelings about the country and where the country should go. Why? And you have universal name ID, and you could theoretically finance your own campaign. Therefore, you would be completely free of any special interest influence, which would be a very strong selling point with the American people. And I think really to mollify me, and because he loves publicity, because publicity is good for business, no matter what business you're in, we made an initial trip to New Hampshire, where I was able to wangle an invitation to the Portsmouth, New Hampshire Chamber of Commerce, where Donald Trump brought down the house. I mean, he got a crowd that was the largest they'd ever had. Vice President George Bush had spoken the previous month. He'd had about 500. We had, as I recall, 1,300, 300 of whom had to sit outside and listen to loudspeakers that had been put up because the crowd was at such an overflow point. That was really the first time that I saw the Trump magic, the Trump charisma. Charisma is something you're either born with or you just don't have. And well, Donald Trump has it. All these years in politics, though, my experience in 13 presidential campaigns from Nixon to Trump, including 3 for the great Ronald Reagan, all these things have taught me that our politics has become more volatile than ever before, meaning that events, big and small, can really change the outcome virtually overnight, certainly change the immediate polling. Despite the fact that the president is leading in every swing state save one and continues to maintain a modest lead nationally, this is even according to the latest New York Times poll, I still see this race being extraordinarily close and hard fought. Donald Trump, just to give you an example, really did change the race this past week with an incredible event in the South Bronx. Now, the last time a Republican candidate went to the South Bronx was in 1980 when I was running Ronald Reagan's New York campaign for president. And with the support of Ray Donovan, who was then a New Jersey businessman, later President Ronald Reagan's labor secretary, and Dr. James FX O'Rourke, who was the former mayor of Yonkers, former chairman of the Westchester County Republican Committee, and the chairman of Ronald Reagan's campaign for president, all agreed that we should make a foray into the South Bronx. We did. It was used in this case as a demonstration of how the urban policies of Jimmy Carter had failed America. It was extraordinarily successful. By the way, Reagan went on to win not only New York State in 1980, but to win it yet again for re-election in 1984. But Donald Trump went to the Bronx. It was a very different thing, very much like his crowd in Wildwood, New Jersey, at the Jersey Shore about 10, 12 days ago, a record breaker. You had an enormous crowd, and on TV I was watching, even the talking heads at CNN had to admit that the vast majority of those people were New Yorkers. Yeah, there were a few people who drove 100 miles from Pennsylvania or elsewhere, some from as far away as New England, upper New England, but overwhelmingly it was a New York crowd. Congresswoman AOC, the socialist bartender from the Bronx who represents the district, well, she wasn't too happy. Here's what she had to say.
And by the way, he's doing it in the South Bronx not to make a point, but because he's got court. And the man practically has the legal version of an ankle bracelet around him, and he can't leave the 5 boroughs because he always has to be in court. And so it is truly an embarrassment to him.
Actually, of course, she's wrong. He flew from Florida. Essentially, his attorneys rested their case late last week. And he doesn't have to be back in court into next week. But more importantly, he did do it to make a point. The point is that his campaign is going to go into not only New York, but Milwaukee, Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, Miami. And this is justified largely because the polling shows that Donald Trump is making great gains among heretofore traditionally Democratic voter groups. So you have to go hunting, as they say, where the ducks are. And I expect the Trump campaign to break the mold and go into those states and make a heavy play for some of those urban areas. Believe me, that can change the race. Then you have the question of these early debates. Now, this is a little bit of a mystery to me. Last weekend here on the Roger Stone Show, we kind of reviewed some of the most famous debates in American political history. Obviously the Nixon-Kennedy debate, the Reagan-Carter debate, the Reagan-Mondale debate, the Bush-Dukakis debate, and then, of course, most famously, the Trump-Hillary Clinton debates. This will be the first time we've ever had, should this all hold together, a debate prior to either one of these candidates being the legal nominee of their party. That doesn't happen until the conventions. The Republican convention is in July. The Democratic convention is in August. So this is new ground here. I think it is very, very high risk for the president, President Biden, that is, because I actually think, based on my own sources, that the Biden campaign never expected Donald Trump to accept this challenge. They thought that Biden would challenge Trump to debate on CNN, that Trump would decline, taking away the issue that Biden actually does not want to debate, and that Donald Trump has been roasting him over it. They figured Trump would decline the CNN debate based on the setup and the rules. But to their surprise, well, Donald Trump is ready to go right in to the lion's den. That, believe me, could change the entire trajectory of the race. Then, of course, there's the New York trial, a verdict presumably coming soon. That, too, could roil the race. Criminal defense lawyer David Schoen, who represented Donald Trump on the Senate floor in the trial over impeachment, joins us today to analyze the Manhattan trial of Donald Trump. I'm anxious to hear that. Schoen is a man with incredible insights. We've had him here on the Roger Stone Show a couple other times, and very honored to have him with us today. You folks are not going to want to miss that. What's going to happen? What will the jury decide? Well, no person can know that. We shall see, but it is certainly a moment of high drama coming our way. Also on deck today is a discussion of the vice presidential choice of Donald Trump. Traditionally, of course, the vice presidential candidates have not had an enormous impact on the results. People tend to vote for candidates for president. The vice presidential candidate has, generally speaking, not mattered, at least not politically. This could be different, however, not only because Kamala Harris, the sitting vice president, is so extraordinarily unpopular. I think her candidacy is going to be controversial because, to be candid, President Joe Biden does not look well. He does not act well. He looks and acts frail. We don't wish any ill will on him, but he does not look to me like a man who is up to the rigors of a presidential campaign, which is an all-consuming exercise, which takes enormous energy and physical stamina, not to mention focus. So maybe the vice presidential nominees will be a bit more important because Well, voters may assume that if they're voting for Joe Biden, they may be actually getting a President Kamala Harris. Now, some could point to Donald Trump's age, but I think his level of energy discounts the idea that we're going to lose him tomorrow. President Richard Nixon once said to me that when you're looking for a vice presidential candidate, don't look for someone who can help you, just look for someone who cannot hurt you or will not hurt you. The vice presidential speculation list is out there, but today, one of those under serious consideration, Tulsi Gabbard, former Democratic member of Congress, now an independent, she joins the Roger Stone Show a little bit later. She has a new book out, which is not to be missed. It's called For Love of Country, Leave the Democrat Party Behind. That book is a #1 bestseller. We're going to talk to her about that. That's an interview you most definitely do not want to miss. We've got also joining us, of course, is Troy Smith. He is the editor-in-chief of Slingshot.News. He's working on a very hot story. It is Mr. Smith's contention that the Iranian government has penetrated the highest level of the U.S. State Department. He says it's the biggest spy scandal since Soviet spy Alger Hiss. We have all of that for you and more coming up on The Roger Stone Show, and we'll be right back.
This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back on this Memorial Day weekend. As I was saying before the break, Troy Smith, the editor-in-chief of Slingshot.News, which is a hot new alternative news outlet, joins us, not only to talk about the fact that he believes that the highest level of the State Department and our foreign policy making apparatus has been penetrated by at least 2 Iranian spies. He calls it, as I said, the biggest spy scandal since Soviet spy Alger Hiss infiltrated the Roosevelt and Truman administrations. This, by the way, for those who are old enough to remember, is how Congressman Richard Nixon got his start. He was on the House Un-American Activities Committee. He became persuaded that the erudite, Harvard-educated Hiss was a spy. Hiss denied it. The FBI later produced proof of it. Hiss ultimately was convicted of perjury. But the most important part of this story is that after the Soviet Union fell, and American officials and later researchers were able to get access to the KGB records, well, we found out that Alger Hiss really was a Russian spy. Interestingly enough, Troy Smith is also going to talk to us about the cancellation, yet again, of the elections in Ukraine. I'm scratching my head about this because we've given more than $160 billion for the war in Ukraine. We're constantly being told that we're fighting for democracy. But a country that does not have elections, a country whose president locks up the leaders of all the other major and minor alternative parties other than his, a president who shuts down television stations, newspapers, and radio stations because they don't repeat the government narrative, a country that arrests journalists, a country that has shut down the largest church in Ukraine, the Orthodox Church. That is not a democracy. Troy Smith of Slingshot.News is going to talk to us about that today, as well as the fact that, we just found out that the Central Intelligence Agency has been covering up for Hunter Biden. That's That's kind of a bombshell story here today as well. So you're not going to want to miss that particular interview. I must say there is some satisfaction with the exposure of Michael Cohen there in Manhattan in the so-called hush money trial. Cohen was on the front page of the New York Post last week. It said, liar, con artist, thief. Well, I know that to be true because, well, Michael Cohen lied about me. Reading from CNN, Donald Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, is prepared to testify that Trump was aware of longtime advisor Roger Stone's efforts to reach out to WikiLeaks in advance of its release of damaging information about Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, according to a copy of his public testimony submitted to Congress and obtained by who else? CNN. Quote, Mr. Stone told Mr. Trump that he has just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange and that Mr. Assange told Mr. Stone that within a couple of days, there would be a massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. The problem with that is, all of that is untrue. I've never spoken to Julian Assange. The only text messages I ever had with a flack at WikiLeaks basically told me to buzz off. And Mr. Cohen first said this happened in July. Then he kind of changed his tune and said that, no, it happened in August. Folks, I can tell you based on telephone records when it happened. It happened never. That's when it happened. And in fact, the prosecutors in my case, where I was basically put through a Soviet-style show trial, despite the fact that I actually hadn't broken any laws, to pressure me to testify against Donald Trump. Well, they determined that Mr. Cohen was not a credible witness, and prosecutors and Robert Mueller's team, these guys were not cream puffs, they never brought any of this into my trial. They didn't call Mr. Cohen as a witness because they did not find him credible. It is kind of heartening to see him entirely exposed in Manhattan, where I think the government's case is not only thin, but non-existent. It's interesting also for me to see, watching American politics, that, well, the Justice Department refuses to release the tape of President Joe Biden's interview with special counsel Robert Hur, claiming executive privilege. But Richard Nixon's Watergate tapes, which he declared executive privilege over, those were released by the U.S. Supreme Court. So how is it that what's good for Nixon is not good for Biden? By the way, if you missed the interview with President Donald Trump with John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby a couple of days ago, it was amazing. And you can now go to the WABC app, the 77 WABC app on your cell phone. Go to the App Store and download it right now because you want to find that interview and listen to it. It was extraordinarily dynamic and one of the best interviews I've heard with our former president. All right, buckle your seatbelts, folks. This is the Roger Stone Show on Memorial Day weekend. And as the great one Jackie Gleason used to say, away we go.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
You need a vacation, so why not come play in LA? Fill your days with fun and let Los Angeles dazzle you with iconic landmarks, epic scenery, and stunning coastlines. And when the sun goes down, it's the perfect place to enjoy world-class dining and nightlife. Let play lead the way and soak up all this city has to offer. Start planning your LA getaway now at visitcalifornia.com.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show here at 77 WABC. We are the crown jewel of AM radio, the most powerful and influential AM radio in the United States. If you don't live in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area where I was born and grew up, and you can't hear us at 770 on the AM dial, you can always go to WABCradio.com, WABCradio.com, because we're live streaming worldwide. I think it's 173 countries around the world where you can hear our great programming. So tune in every Sunday, no matter where you live. You don't want to miss Sid Rosenberg in the mornings. I had a great interview with Sid this past Friday. That's to me a great show. I'm going to be with I was with Larry Kudlow for his show yesterday. Larry Kudlow is the man who executed and implemented Donald Trump's plan to revitalize the American economy and turbocharge it. He is the apostle of economic growth. You don't want to miss the Larry Kudlow show. So remember to go to the App Store and grab the 77 WABC radio app. Joining me now is an incredible young journalist. Troy Smith is the editor-in-chief of Slingshot.news. And he's come to my initial attention because he's broken some major investigative stories. He's getting a lot of public attention. Troy Smith, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Roger, it's an honor to be with you as always, and you've been doing so well on this WABC show. It's the talk of the town, and it's an honor to be here.
Troy, just for the edification of my audience, how old are you?
I am 24 years old. I turned 24 in January.
Folks, this is absolutely incredible. If you go to slingshot.news, you will see some of the best written, best reported journalism. But our guest today is 24 years old, and he's a powerhouse. Troy, you told me last week that you're working on a major story that basically reveals that the highest levels of the State Department in the Biden administration appear to have been penetrated by an Iranian spy ring. You would think that this would be front page on every major newspaper in the country. You would think it would lead the evening news on the networks and on cable, yet I haven't seen a single story on it. What's going on here?
Well, Roger, it's very important to point out the centerpiece figure in all of this is a man by the name of Robert Malley, who is who is currently on leave. He's been suspended, which we'll get into just in a second here. But he is Biden's special envoy to Iran. Now, historically, Roger, this individual, Robert Malley, is important because he was the original architect of the Iran deal in 2015, which paved the way for Iran to obtain nuclear weapons, which our latest reports show that Iran has either developed them fully or is extremely close to developing them within the next several months. So Robert Malley, the architect of the original Iran deal, he also is recently been placed on leave at the State Department and from the Biden administration because of a scandal in which he had classified documents, much like Hillary Clinton, on his personal email and cell phone. And in a recent report that's kind of that we're developing right now on slingshot.news and that's beginning to break across the country is that these documents, Roger, these classified national security documents were accessed while in possession of Malley on his personal email and cell phone by a hostile cyber actor, possibly revealing the fact that Malley, who has ties to Iran, who has been working with Iran for some time, may have given them top secret classified documents. And as you point out, Roger, why is this not headline news? Why is this not the front page of every major newspaper in this country? I think the fact that it isn't speaks volumes as to the level to which our press will go to cover up important information, especially as it pertains to the failures of the foreign policy of the Biden administration.
Yeah, so evidently Mr. Malley is the architect of this policy in which we have unfrozen well in excess of $100 billion in assets for Ukraine, based on a promise that they would use this only for quote unquote humanitarian purposes. Well, that's at least what they said before they got the money. Once they got the money, they said, well, we can do anything we want with this money. It's ours. I have little doubt that they're using it to fund their nuclear weapons development program. Also abundantly clear they're using it to subsidize Hamas and Hezbollah. I believe subsidizing the attack on Israel on October 7th. It's hard for me to understand how being on both sides of this conflict is good for the United States. Israel is our traditional ally, the only democracy in the region. But we seem, and we had the author and investigative reporter Lee Smith on the show last weekend. He made the case that really what Biden is doing is carrying out the precepts of an Obama administration sea change of policy regarding the Middle East, in which, for whatever reason, they think elevating the power and influence of Iran will somehow bring greater stability to the region, when in fact, what will bring and has begun to bring greater stability to the region is the alliance of Israel and Saudi Arabia, Israel and Jordan, Israel and Egypt. Interesting to me that when the Iranians launched what historically now is the largest missile attack in world history against Israel only weeks ago, most Americans were glued to their television sets or their radios because we wondered whether we might be on the cusp of World War III, that anti-missile technology, including Israel's Iron Dome, but also anti-missile technology provided by the United States, France, the United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt, was so successful that the casualties, I believe, one person was killed, if I read that correctly. So there, I think, is the seeds of stability in the region, which does not have to do with a nuclear Iran. People have to recognize this is not like World War II, where Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, most definitely evil, but not committed to their own death. In other words, they wanted to win. They wanted to control the world. They were not anxious to become martyrs. In radical Islam, you have people who are prepared to kill themselves in order to kill a maximum number of other non-Islamic individuals. To me, this is a very scary opponent, a very scary enemy, unlike anything we have ever faced before. Troy, late last week, middle of last week, I guess it was, we learned that the helicopter carrying the Iranian president went down, and after some delay, I think due to the region that the helicopter went down in and the difficulty of searching for wreckage, ultimately the Iranian state announced that the president of Iran was dead. I guess my question was this just an accident? We're flying into bad weather, or do you think that there may have been foul play here? I can think of a number of entities that might want the Iranian president out of the way. Some of them, by the way, Iranian entities, because there is a struggle for succession and power within their system. I mean, they have the supreme leader, that's Khomeini, who's reportedly not in good health. They also had this president, who was also, I think, had already announced that he was suffering from cancer. There are a couple of contenders to become the next president and perhaps the next supreme leader. So that's one possibility. The other possibility, quite obviously, is the Mossad. Any insights into the death of the Iranian president?
Yes, absolutely, Roger. I've spoken with quite a few people on this matter, and I'm told by people in the know and who have experience with this technology that it is basically impossible for this to have happened in just a random circumstance. Now, Roger, I will point out that the importance of Iran is becoming a bigger and bigger in the world stage. And here's exactly why. Because under the Biden administration and through their kind of coercing the UN to do so, through the Biden administration and the UN, they've lifted sanctions. Biden and his team have lifted sanctions on Iran that's allowed them to ship billions and billions of dollars in oil to China, where now Iran is the number one oil exporter to China. So China's building this new economy to take on the U.S., and they're using Iranian oil to do it. Now, on top of this, Roger, I've spoken to sources in the Middle East that tell me things have gotten so bad in Iraq with Iranian groups basically taking over the oil production in that country that my sources are telling me that the Iraqi government officials fear that they will actually be executed in the next coming months because it's gotten so bad. The Iranians are taking over the Middle East, and they're doing so because they are empowered, Roger, by the Biden administration. And while Robert Malley has been suspended, I think it's important to point out that his protege, a woman named Ariana Tabatabai, is currently working at the State Department, or in the Pentagon, I'm sorry, as a chief of staff for the Assistant Secretary of Defense. So here's a woman that has been by Malley's side, the guy who orchestrated the nuclear Iran deal, and has now been suspended for basically turning over documents to a hostile Iranian regime, top secret classified documents, and his protege is still involved in the Pentagon. And all the while, Roger, as the oil flows from Iran to China, billions of dollars are coming in, and we can only look at the Biden regime, including Ariana Tabatabai and Robert Malley and the Barack Obama administration, for making this possible.
Really quite extraordinary. The other thing I saw you reporting on is the fact that Volodymyr Zelensky announced yet again that we would have the delay of elections in that country. So we are constantly told that we're fighting for democracy, but there seems to be no democracy.
Well, absolutely, Roger. And billions of dollars have flown from the United States to Ukraine. Basically, all of it has been signed off by the establishment Republicans in Congress, as well as the establishment Democrats in Congress. And people in the United States have taken it to their heart to believe that sending money, taxpayer money, to a country called Ukraine is defending democracy. All the while, all along throughout this conflict, Roger, Zelensky has overseen the arrest of his political opponents. He's overseen a crackdown on things like church gatherings and religion and religious freedom. And the idea that we as a country are somehow held hostage by the people in Washington, D.C. to continue to send our taxpayer money to a country that has suspended democracy, suspended elections in favor of totalitarianism, I think is a disgrace. And I think most American voters would agree with that. I'm a person, Roger, that believes that when Marjorie Taylor Greene is laughed at in Congress for saying that money should not go to Ukraine, that a majority of the American people stand with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and when they laugh, when the establishment figures of the Republican and Democrat parties laugh at people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, when they stand up and say no more money to Ukraine, they're really laughing at common sense Americans out there who are working to make ends meet, having the government confiscate their money and sending it to a country that has suspended democracy in favor of totalitarianism. It's awful.
Another story that I know you're very much up on are these subpoenas that were sent to former White House press spokeswoman Jen Psaki. What is that? This has to do with her book. What is that all about?
Well, Roger, here's the problem. We've had a system over the last few years that has hammered the congressional subpoena. And the problem is there's a total disparity as to enforcement when it comes to the political affiliations of the people who receive the subpoenas. When Merrick Garland gets a subpoena, as he was trying to kind of demonstrate or talk about just the other day, he kind of picks and chooses which ones are valid, and he's allowed to do so. When it comes to Hunter Biden, Roger, Hunter Biden is allowed to thumb his nose at a subpoena, but when it comes to Steve Bannon or it comes to Peter Navarro, who is currently in prison for defying a congressional subpoena, the full weight of the law is used to come after. And you've experienced this too, because you were subpoenaed by Congress and you chose to testify and give assert your Fifth Amendment rights. I think that Jen Psaki is defying a subpoena from Congress over her book, which has already had to be reprinted, by the way, Roger. Gold Star families came out and were livid with Psaki because the book states that Biden didn't check his watch during the dignified transfers of 13 U.S. service members who were killed during Biden's botched Afghanistan withdrawal. Psaki decided to reprint the book, and now afterwards, she's also being criticized for basically making money off of the death of these U.S. service members by telling her story, the story of a time where she was serving in government and she was supposed to be helping these people. And the fact that she's out there making money over it, Congress wants to take a look at it, and she's defying the subpoena. So if the law was applied equally, Roger, Jen Psaki would be in prison just like Peter Navarro. But as we see time and time again, if you're a Republican, they come after you. And if you're a Democrat, it seems that you really can't do anything as long as you continue to echo the talking points of the establishment.
Definitely seems that way. The other big story you were on top of is revelation late last week that the Central Intelligence Agency intervened essentially to stop the Justice Department and the FBI from interviewing this fellow Kevin Morris, who is described as Hunter Biden's sugar daddy. He is the guy who wrote a check to pay Hunter Biden's $2 million tax debt. He's paid for the attorneys surrounding all of the legal proceedings around Hunter Biden. Yet we have a government entity blocking yet another government entity from doing its job in what we had hoped would be a free and politically unbiased investigation. What's going on here?
Well, Roger, it's very important. You know, the House Judiciary Committee Chairman, Jim Jordan, along with the Oversight and Accountability Committee Chairman, James Comer, have revealed that a whistleblower has disclosed to several committees that the Central Intelligence Agency intervened to stop the IRS from interviewing Kevin Morris, an associate and attorney of Hunter Biden. And it's important because Kevin Morris was the individual that allegedly paid Hunter Biden's tax bill. When he owed millions of dollars to the IRS, it was Kevin Morris who stepped in. Not only that, Roger, but Kevin Morris also has worked with Hunter Biden for years. I mean, there's photos even of the two staying together in California, and Kevin Morris was photographed smoking a bong in a second-story window. So the idea, I think, the most important question when it comes to this situation is we have to ask why. Why would the Central Intelligence Agency be intervening and stopping the IRS from interviewing Hunter Biden's attorney in an investigation about taxes that he allegedly paid? I think it's a question that most people, if you look into it, you'll be surprised to find your answer. And the answer, as kind of was with the last question, Roger, there is a favoritism that comes with being a Democrat. And you've experienced this on the other hand, where you have been persecuted because you are a Republican. And we've seen this in the case even involving Hunter Biden, where a federal judge stated that your case in a ruling where he kind of dismissed Hunter Biden's attempt to kind of dismiss his tax charges, he said that your tax case and Hunter Biden's tax case were apples and oranges, yet it was Kevin Morris and Hunter Biden that tried to use your case to get out of their own tax charges. I'd love for you to talk about that, too, because it's so important in this case.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC Radio. We are with Troy Smith, editor-in-chief of Slingshot.news, and we'll be right back.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injuries and additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
This episode is brought to you by Principles. Are there limits to the U.S. government's debt growth? What will happen if the debts are not curtailed? What should policymakers or investors do? Those are urgent questions that legendary investor and New York Times bestselling author Ray Dalio addresses in his new book, How Countries Go Broke: The Big Cycle. The book comes out in June and is available for pre-order today, wherever books are sold.
Impact confirmed. The Slayer has been activated.
Demonic threat level increasing.
Hold the line!
All the power of hell cowering before one man.
id Software presents Doom: The Dark Ages. Available May 15th on Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and PC. Pre-order now.
Rated M for mature.
That moment when you realize your skincare is actually working. That's Rodan & Fields, the #1 female dermatologist-founded skincare brand in the U.S. Designed by 2 dermatologists who don't just know women's skin, they know how to formulate for it. Rodan & Fields, love what you see. Tap the banner or visit rodanandfields.com/Spotify to get your exclusive welcome offer.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. This is the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to Troy Smith, who is the editor-in-chief of Slingshot.news. Troy, you just raised the question that Hunter Biden's lawyers tried in court to argue that Hunter Biden was being treated differently than Roger and Nydia Stone because we, too, have delinquent taxes. Some very substantial differences. First of all, I never failed to report a single penny of income at any time. I also never failed to accurately report all assets. So there's no tax evasion on our part. The sad truth is that we had made 9 years of monthly payments on an ever-increasing basis, I might add, without ever being late on a payment or ever missing a payment. So the idea that we were, quote-unquote, evading taxes is entirely ridiculous. A time did come when the Mueller witch hunt case against me brought my wife and I to the edge of bankruptcy. We informed the IRS that we could not make our monthly payment. My lawyers went into negotiation with theirs, seeking a solution, normally under the so-called offer and compromise program. they would negotiate a monthly payment, but they would also give you some break in interest and penalties. So, yeah, it's kind of staggering. Today, my wife and I do owe the IRS about $2 million, but 75% of that $2 million is interest and penalties. We've paid down very substantially more than we still owe. So, as the federal judge said in our case, it was a case of apples and oranges, but that's not what you will read in the media. Troy, what do you make of the revelations last week coming out of the Florida trial, where it's now clear, based on documents we would never have seen unless Judge Eileen Cannon, who's overseeing that case in the Southern District of Florida, ordered the government to unredact documents that proved that the Justice Department had authorized the use of deadly force when they raided Mar-a-Lago. And they also had designated they had a medical unit on hand. They designated the closest trauma center in a hospital. Sure sounds to me like folks who were anticipating problems. I didn't find this at all shocking, because on January 25th, 2019, as you know, my home was stormed by 29 SWAT-clad FBI agents, all of them brandishing assault weapons. They pounded on my front door after bringing a battering ram up to the door to smash it in, as if I wasn't going to answer the door. And yes, I opened the door looking down the barrel of two fully automated M4 assault weapons. It was chilling, to say the least, particularly when you consider that the crime that I was accused wrongly of was a nonviolent crime, a first-time nonviolent crime of lying to Congress under oath in my voluntary testimony, even though any misstatement I made covered up no underlying crime. There was no motive to lie. The case was really about pressuring me to testify falsely against Donald Trump, which, of course, I refused to do. But the worst part, Troy, is that my wife, who is essentially deaf, woke up looking down the barrel of two guns held in her face, inches from her face. Because she is hard of hearing, she was unaware of the fact that I had been arrested. As soon as I was removed to go to the FBI center in Miramar for fingerprinting and mugshots, it occurred to me that if the FBI agents didn't know my wife was deaf, that she might have made a false move because she didn't know what was going on, and that she might be shot. Yes, it scared the hell out of me, and I began sweating and praying. My wife was held at gunpoint for 13 hours at gunpoint while the FBI ransacked my home looking for evidence of Russian collusion and, of course, finding nothing. It's quite amazing, as you'll recall, that we had a full camera crew from CNN right outside my home. I actually saw them pull up before the FBI arrived, and they won an award from the White House Correspondents Association for their shrewd investigative reporting, which is ridiculous because I was arrested at 6:06. At 6:11, a woman at CNN texted my attorney a copy of my still sealed indictment. Had no court markings or timestamps on them, but it did have the initials in the metadata tags of the man who wrote it, and therefore the man who leaked it, Mueller prosecutor Andrew Weissman. By the way, leaking to the media the government's plans to execute a search warrant or an arrest warrant is a felony. But the judge didn't care. So, look, a deadly force was used there, just as the FBI, rummaged through Melania Trump's underwear drawer, rummaged through her wardrobe. They also rummaged through my wife's underwear drawer and also through her wardrobe. This was a great show of force, a political statement that cost the taxpayers $1.1 million. P.S. My lawyer spoke to the special counsel's office the day before, and I most certainly could have very simply been told that I would be charged, and I could have turned myself in, which would have saved the taxpayers $1.1 million. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank my guest, Troy Smith at slingshot.news. Troy, how can folks subscribe to your hot new publication?
Well, I would urge everyone to go to Twitter or X, as it's called now, and follow us at News Slingshot. Again, that's at News Slingshot. And then you can also subscribe on our website, slingshot.news. Roger, I want to thank you for having me on. It was an honor to be here with you today.
Both those subscriptions, by the way, folks, are absolutely free. So I urge you to check them out. I want to thank my guest, Troy Smith. This is the Roger Stone Show. You're not going to want to miss potential vice presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard, so don't touch that dial.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
Clorox Sentiva smells like lavender. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like...
All right, that could go on for a while. Experience the long-lasting freshness of Clorox Sentiva. Available in Clorox Sentiva Lavender Scented Bleach. Use as directed.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
This episode is brought to you by Netflix. 3 couples, 4 vacations, a lot to unpack. Watch The 4 Seasons, a new series starring comedy favorites Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, and more in a hilarious and heartfelt love letter to long-term relationships. Based on the original Alan Alda film. Watch The 4 Seasons, streaming now only on Netflix.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone on this beautiful Memorial Day weekend. As I said in the opening, our politics are extraordinarily volatile. We have seen a veritable tsunami of lawfare against President Donald Trump, cases filed against him in New York, 2 different cases in Manhattan, the so-called valuations trial that was over some weeks ago. Also now a trial wrapping up, the so-called hush money trial. You still have outstanding cases against him filed in South Florida, pertaining to his handling of presidential documents, classified top secret documents. And there's still pending I guess it's an election interference case in Washington, D.C., in the D.C. jurisdiction. Joining us now is veteran criminal defense lawyer David Schoen. He is, to my mind, literally the most brilliant lawyer in the country because he's that rare lawyer who can look beyond the law, understands the law intimately, but can look beyond the law to understand the impact of external factors on any high-profile trial. The idea that the jurors will never see any publicity is quaint, but it's not a reality. And David Schoen has a big picture perspective that I have found very, very few lawyers to have. He very ably represented President Donald Trump on the Senate floor in one of the 2 impeachments, and it is our great honor to welcome David Schoen, criminal defense lawyer, to the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you very much. It's my honor to be here.
David, first of all, I understand you just won a very big legal victory in Baltimore. I don't know if you're able to talk about that case, but...
Sure. I appreciate very much you bringing that up. It's a very important case to me. I had the honor of representing a doctor, and my co-counsel, Chris Mead, represented his wife, also a doctor. And they were falsely charged with a HIPAA violation in aid of Russia, if you can believe that. They wanted to do humanitarian work in the Ukraine. They reached out to Ukrainian organizations, to the Russian embassy. They just wanted to save lives. They ended up getting set up by an FBI agent, so that by the 3rd meeting they had, trying to get over to the Ukraine, we saw an email go from the government prosecutor saying something like, well, I found something we can get them on. Let's try for a HIPAA violation. They asked them to produce some medical records. They brought in an old notebook with some patients just to prove they were really doctors, and they arrested them, charged them with a felony HIPAA violation with the intent to cause malicious harm or for personal gain. In any event, yesterday, the judge, a very fine judge, federal judge in Baltimore, Judge Gallagher, issued a 42-page opinion dismissing all charges against the defendants.
That is truly great, and it gives one some confidence that there still is justice within our judicial system. So congratulations on that. Let's move to the hottest news story on the legal front, and that, of course, is the ongoing Manhattan trial brought by District Attorney Alvin Bragg against President Donald Trump pertaining to these payments and a non-disclosure agreement that was executed by Michael Cohen, a former lawyer for Donald Trump. You made a very compelling case, I think it was on CNN that I saw it, that this is a fundamentally flawed indictment because there's no crime. You can't identify an underlying crime. Now, I'm not an attorney, but even I could figure out that even if Trump was responsible for the things attributed to him, which he vehemently denies, this would be a business records case, a civil business records case, which are normally adjudicated with a fine. But somehow Alvin Bragg, who campaigned, again, like Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, on, quote-unquote, getting Donald Trump, had this case bumped up to a criminal case. And Trump is facing felony charges. Can you explain this to us?
Sure. To the extent anyone can explain it. And I don't think there's any basis even for a civil case. I don't think anything was done wrong or against the law or in violation of any provision of the law. But here's what I mean from what I've said. First of all, I believe the indictment itself is constitutionally defective because it doesn't charge a crime. The way the statute works is under this 17510, it's called, the New York penal law, is that it's a misdemeanor to falsify business records with the intent to defraud. And then it becomes a felony if the person did that with the intent to commit or conceal another crime. So in this case, as you know, they tried to bump it up to a felony because they were past the statute of limitations for a misdemeanor. It's a very novel theory for good reason, because it doesn't make any sense. And in this case, they never identified what that other crime allegedly was that President Trump is accused of committing as the reason for falsifying the business records. And so it could be campaign finance violation, could be some kind of election interference allegation, a tax charge. They're all very different offenses. And without identifying that target crime, and it's the grand jury's job to identify it, not some prosecutor, without having the grand jury identify that crime, you can't possibly defend against it, consistent with due process. There are double jeopardy concerns to be considered, but all kinds of Fifth and Sixth Amendment fair trial rights and New York State constitutional rights are violated when you can't know what you're defending against. The judge said in an order denying a motion to dismiss, well, the government's put out 4 theories about what it could be. That's exactly why you can't go forward with this. You can't be expected to defend against 4 theories. And you saw it all play out in the jury instructions. God only knows what to charge the jury because nobody has identified the crime. Now, here's some of these commentators saying, well, anyone who sat in the courtroom, Norm Eisen said it the other day, you sat in the courtroom, you know what the government thinks the crime was. I don't care what the government thinks the crime was, and neither does the Constitution. The Constitution required the grand jury to charge a crime. What I mean, I'll wrap it up here, but on the other side of things is, I don't believe even the misdemeanor was committed. Based on the testimony we heard, the allegation is he falsely attributed business entries for money that was paid over to Michael Cohen as legal expenses. It sounds like it was legal expenses, certainly included in it, and certainly not calling it that would have a criminal nature to it. In fact, one of the witnesses early on, Davidson, testified wasn't even hush money. It was a settlement payment. The evidence was clear that money went to Michael Cohen, who was the lawyer. So nobody on earth, other than Alvin Bragg, who, as you say, ran on a platform of getting Donald Trump, would have come up with a cockamamie charge like that. It's an offense to our criminal justice system.
But David, isn't it kind of odd or unusual that the individual, Michael Colangelo, who was at one point the number 3 guy at the U.S. Justice Department in Washington in the Biden administration, would leave that august and important decision to become a prosecutor in a county DA's office in order to bring this case?
I think it is unusual, but not for someone who's obsessed with getting Donald Trump also. Look, we're seeing all of the stops pulled out here for political reasons in each of these cases. It's really astonishing, and it's offensive when the media doesn't call it for what it is. At least be honest about it.
A very good point. One of the things I wondered, if you look at the news coverage, you know that Fani Willis and Nathan Wade, prosecutors from Georgia, met with the legal counsel in the Biden White House, met with the Department of Justice. We know certainly that Jack Smith met with individuals in the Department of Justice and in the Biden White House. We know that Alvin Bragg and Fani Willis both met with individuals in the White House and in the Justice Department. Is this not a racketeering conspiracy to interfere with the election? Because this level of coordination certainly gives one that impression.
It gives the American people that impression, and that's a terrible, terrible message to send. Why is this? Why is there this coordination among state and federal officials? And I don't want to hear from somebody in the media again, oh, there's always coordination. No, we're talking about targeting one person here who's the leading candidate for president during the election season, and clear coordination, people of the same political party as each other, Democratic Party, out to get Donald Trump. It's a complete perversion of the criminal justice system, and we can't survive that kind of thing in this country. I'm sorry to say. We have to be able to depend on the integrity of our governmental systems, but especially the criminal justice system. When the stakes are so high, people go to prison with misconduct by prosecutors, and especially when there's a political agenda. It's the absolute antithesis of what former Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson said is the role of the prosecutor, a very famous article that he wrote many years ago.
So let's go to the actual trial. You were on this show, I think several weeks ago, and you made a very strong case that Robert Costello, a former federal prosecutor, now a criminal defense attorney, very respected in New York legal circles, who had represented Michael Cohen at one time, no longer does. The privilege was waived in that situation, and therefore you made a very cogent case that Mr. Costello should be called as a witness by President Trump's lawyers. I think that his very, very compelling testimony before the House Oversight Committee by Mr. Costello, who's quite articulate, was a major factor in his ultimately being called as a witness in the Manhattan trial. Yet I was confused by the contretemps between he and the judge. Some have said that while Costello was a very effective witness for the president, he might have been more effective. I have a hard time reading what exactly was going on there.
Yeah, it's almost impossible, in my view, to have bungled this as badly as it was bungled. And still, even the Wall Street Journal acknowledged Bob Costello scored some strong points. But, I've gone back over the transcript. Here's what happened. The press just loves to report about the interchange between Judge Merchan and Bob Costello and the berating that Merchan gave him and all of that. First of all, I'll say this. I've been in front of Judge Merchan. I find him to be incompetent. I find him to be a bully. I find him to be insecure. In this case, add the extra element that he never should have been on the case, should have been recused as a matter of law because of his daughter's business dealings and so on. But put all of that aside for a second. He also hates Donald Trump. And so the idea for him, I believe, having a witness on the stand who was going to contradict a government witness and their primary witness, Michael Cohen, was complete anathema to him. So he was against Bob Costello from the start. But here's how things went awry. This is what has not been reported in the press. Prior to Bob Costello testifying, there was a sidebar, a meeting between the lawyers and the judge to discuss the nature of his testimony and objections that the prosecutor had to it. Even Merchan said at the time that he wished they would have brought this to his attention beforehand. These are complicated issues, he said. He believed. And so he stopped the trial, and he had the lawyers come in and start from scratch again to tell him what their objections were and what the basis was for calling Costello. He then entered a ruling severely limiting Costello's testimony. I think he was dead wrong on the evidentiary conclusions he came to. But putting that aside, he's the judge, and those were all subject to being appealed. But it skewed the deck, in my opinion. But anyway, he made a decision that the testimony would be very narrow. So he told that to the lawyers, but he never told it to Bob Costello. And the lawyers, this was, in my view, President Trump's lawyer, this guy Bove, who was handling Bob Costello, it was absolutely his obligation to tell the witness ahead of time that the judge has restricted testimony to the following subjects. Therefore, we have to be careful to follow his rules. As we go forward, I've lodged my objection already. He never spoke to Costello about it. President Trump deserves much better than that because Bob Costello could have been the absolute star witness in the case had he been properly prepared, which he wasn't. They never properly prepared him for his testimony, and had he simply been instructed about the judge's limitations. And so what you saw happen was the lawyer, Bove, went into areas the judge had said he couldn't go into. The judge also was wrong with some of his rulings. But without having ever explained to Costello that the testimony can be limited, each time an objection came up that seemed to Costello relevant, he was surprised by the objection. And at one point, he said, geez, when an objection was sustained. The judge took great exception to that, which is also complete nonsense. And he cleared the courtroom. Now, in my view, had I been the lawyer in the case, I absolutely would have objected to that. It violated the Sixth Amendment right to a public trial. And as a consequence of that, other rights of President Trump, in my view. There's no record indication that the lawyer objected. The press objected to being kicked out of the courtroom.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to legal superstar David Schoen. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with The Roger Stone Show.
This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. This is the Roger Stone Show, and we're talking to David Schoen, a prominent and widely respected criminal defense attorney. It was from David Schoen that I learned that there's a very substantial difference between a former federal prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney. They are not the same thing. I'm not trying to denigrate the legal skills of any particular former federal prosecutor, but as David points out, one has to be a strategist, a legal strategist, to do their very best, an obligation that goes along with their oath to do their very best to represent the interests of their client. But it's a different, more strategic way of thinking. David, much of the tsunami of lawfare against Donald Trump, this all comes in the fourth year of Joe Biden's presidency, which makes it all the more suspect. If, in fact, the president was guilty of any crimes, which I believe he was not, why were these cases not brought in the first year of the Biden presidency or in the first year after the Trump presidency ended? Does that in itself not point to a political motivation in these trials?
Absolutely, and probably the New York case is the sort of centerpiece for that analysis. I mean, you're talking about crime, an alleged crime that happened, the Stormy Daniels event. Let's just say that's the centerpiece of it. Then, you're talking about a mass not great 19 years ago, 18 years ago, something like that. Why wasn't that ever brought before? But you know what? They considered it, and they put a special prosecutor in, another Trump hater, Mark Pomerantz, in to investigate. And we know from his book that the people in the office just didn't believe this case should be brought, including at that time the leaders of the office. But still they brought it with a novel theory that never should have been brought. And all of the cases coming together at one time, of course it's a political agenda. And anyone who says otherwise just really is not being honest or fair in examining the situation.
Yeah, as I said at the opening of the show, Michael Cohen went to the grand jury, was questioned about me. He made allegations about me in which it was alleged that he overheard a phone call between me and Donald Trump, candidate Trump, in 2016. First he said it was July, then he said it was August. The timing doesn't even make sense. By the way, it doesn't even fit the time frame of the allegations presented to the court by the prosecutors in my case. I think they looked at Michael Cohen and they determined that he was just not credible as a witness. All of these witnesses, whether it's Stormy Daniels or Michael Cohen, whose book is entitled Revenge, do they not hurt the government's case when their animus to Trump becomes so obvious and therefore their motive to potentially lie becomes so obvious?
Absolutely. I think from the beginning of this thing, starting with the Mueller investigation, all of that, if they really believed Donald Trump had done something wrong, and that's something important for the American people to know, why would you have to skew every single investigation for political gain? And that from the Mueller Commission. Why would you have anyone like an Andrew Weissman anywhere near an investigation that must depend ultimately for its acceptance on its integrity? You wouldn't. But they only put sort of people, Democratic party contributors, and so on that. And we've seen it with every investigation so far. Jack Smith's got a very, very poor history of judgment, quite frankly. He ruined lives with cases he's brought. And that goes with people on his team. He's got a member of his team now named Cooney, who I've had a sanctions motion pending against quite a while, along with his group, other people who are on the Smith team now, lying to a federal judge to get email records from an attorney, and so on. It's just, this is not the way to go about it. We should have people who are completely above board, without any political agenda, investigating these cases. Had they investigated them, they wouldn't have brought any of these prosecutions. But you're right, it's a great disservice.
Well, you raise an excellent point. The chief prosecutor in my case had worked for Hillary Clinton, defending her and the Clinton Foundation in the so-called email server case. The number two in my prosecution had been a counselor to Hillary Clinton at the State Department. Incredibly, Robert Mueller himself testified before Congress that he had no idea that his own law partner, who was the chief prosecutor of my case, had represented Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation, even though Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation paid a very substantial amount of money to Mr. Mueller's law firm. It really does defy credibility. From the beginning, this has really been about timing. One of the things I'm not clear about is how the rest of this plays out. We have now a pending decision by the U.S. Supreme Court regarding the question of presidential immunity. That has now been argued. We're awaiting a decision. Many attorneys tell me they think from a time point of view that it's unlikely that that there can be another federal trial before the election. That would be the D.C. trial regarding election interference. They don't seem to believe that the U.S. Supreme Court can decide in time to schedule a trial that I guess would be, I don't know, September, October. David, you have thoughts on this in the 2 minutes we have left.
Yeah, I assume that the Supreme Court's going to come down with this decision this month or next, obviously. And I believe that decision is going to be something like Nixon versus Fitzgerald. That is, that a president has immunity for an action within the outer perimeters of his official authority, an official act, something like that. That'll then have to be analyzed by the court. I believe Judge Chutkan, the judge who's presiding over the federal case in D.C., to which you're referring, would like to move this case forward as fast as possible. I have to be a little careful. I just won a case in front of her. I'm very proud to say, frankly. But I think that she really wants to bring this case to trial. I don't think, in fairness, it can be brought to trial before the election.
In the Georgia case, I guess at this point appears unlikely to go to trial before the election.
Right. You mentioned Fani Willis before. As you well know, the Georgia Court of Appeals now has agreed to accept the case. The presiding judge in the trial court did not disqualify Fani Willis. She did disqualify Nathan Wade. And now the Court of Appeals has agreed to consider whether he also should have disqualified Fani Willis.
All right. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank our guest, legal defense attorney, criminal defense attorney, David Schoen, legal superstar, in my opinion, for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show. Don't go anywhere, folks, because former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, widely mentioned as a possible vice presidential candidate, is going to be joining us right here on The Roger Stone Show. Wow. In the meantime, David Schoen, thank you so much for joining us on today's show.
Thank you very much.
Support comes from ServiceNow. We're for people doing the creative work they actually want to do. That's why this ad was written and read by a real person and not AI. You know what people don't want to do? Boring, busy work. Now with AI agents built into the ServiceNow platform, you can automate millions of repetitive tasks in every corner of your business, IT, HR, and more, so your people can focus on the work that they want to do. That's putting AI agents to work for people. It's your turn. Visit ServiceNow.com.
You guys, I just found the most incredible Mother's Day gift. It's called Goldbelly. Goldbelly is this amazing site where you can get the most iconic foods from restaurants all across the U.S., shipped anywhere in the country for free in time for Mother's Day. We're talking cakes from Ina Garten and Martha Stewart, Magnolia Bakery's famous banana pudding, and New York bagel brunches. Make Mother's Day perfect with Goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code MOM. That's Goldbelly.com, promo code MOM.
It's The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. This is Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is four-term Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. She was a 2020 presidential candidate, and she is now a New York Times best-selling author. Tulsi Gabbard is a veteran of 3 deployments to war zones in the Middle East and Africa. She has served in uniform for more than 2 decades as currently a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, and also leads a nonprofit organization, We Must Protect. Tulsi Gabbard was first elected to office in Hawaii, the Hawaii State House of Representatives, when she was a mere 21 years old. Due to the attacks of 9/11, she enlisted in the Army National Guard, and then in 2004, she gave up an easy re-election campaign and volunteered to deploy to Iraq with the 29th Brigade Combat Team, where she served in a medical unit. After returning in 2006, Tulsi Gabbard worked in the U.S. Senate as a legislative aide to the senator from Hawaii, who was chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. She then actually volunteered for a second Middle East deployment as a platoon leader. Having experienced firsthand the true costs of war, Tulsi Gabbard ran for Congress at the age of 31 as a Democrat, vowing to honor the lives and sacrifice of her brothers and sisters in uniform. She prevailed in a difficult election and went on to serve in Congress for 8 years as a member of the Armed Services Committee, the Homeland Security Committee, and the Foreign Affairs Committees. She decided to forego a run for re-election to Congress in 2020, running for president at that time as a Democrat. In October of 2022, Tulsi Gabbard announced that she was leaving the Democratic Party. She has decided to put country before party and now approaches every issue, domestic and foreign, based on ensuring the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. Tulsi Gabbard's first book, For Love of Country, Leave the Democratic Party Behind, was released in April, and just last week it hit number 4 on the New York Times bestseller list. I am really honored to have former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard as a guest on The Roger Stone Show.
Thank you so much, Roger. It's great to be here to join you. Thank you.
Very much appreciate your being here. I think this is a good sign. I was so impressed with your book. I went to the local Barnes & Noble to buy a copy for my daughter, and they were out. They were back ordered. So I think that's probably a very good sign. I know I was very proud of my first book, which actually was also a New York Times bestselling author, but this is a great experience. Folks, this is a great book. It essentially explains a life-changing decision. You're leaving the Democratic Party. So tell us about it.
Yeah, Roger, I wrote this book. I began writing this book after I made the decision to leave the Democratic Party, really because I started to hear from a very, very high amount of people who were reaching out and saying, gosh, I feel the same way that you do, and thank you for speaking up, and I feel politically homeless, and I'm not quite sure where I belong in American politics today. The Democrat elite who are leading the Democratic Party are undermining our freedom. They're destroying our democracy, and there are a lot of people who don't quite know. They're disillusioned with our politics of today and care about our country, but not quite sure what to do. So I wrote this book, Roger, to share my own experiences, as well as my own diagnosis of what's going wrong in our country today, to be able to reach out to people and provide them with the knowledge and understanding that they're not alone, and that what they're seeing and experiencing is not imaginary. And so I provide not only my personal experiences serving at the highest levels of the Democratic Party, but also the experiences that I had as a soldier, deploying overseas and experiencing the cost of war. The things that drove me to not only leave the Democratic Party, but to actively urge others to do the same, those who cherish peace and cherish freedom and who love our country, to take a stand to defend freedom and save our country at this point in time where the Democrat elite, Biden-Harris administration, are actually posing that greatest threat to our freedom and our democracy today.
You write in your book, today's Democratic Party is controlled by an elitist cabal of warmongers driven by woke ideology and racializing everything. They are a clear and present danger to the God-given freedoms enshrined in our Constitution. I couldn't agree more with that. I was once kind of a more traditional conservative Republican. I thought initially that the war in Iraq was a good idea. In retrospect, the more I learned, the more I began to doubt that that was a sound decision by the country. You have been out on the circuit. You've done some amazing interviews. You were extraordinary with Tucker Carlson, extraordinary with my friend Patrick Bet-David. This is a message that needs to get out. And you say that many people are telling you that they agree with you, that they are where you are in their thinking.
There are, and it's not just, there are 43% of Americans who don't affiliate with either major political party, but there are also, I almost every day, Roger, I either meet or hear from someone who says that, I'm a Democrat, but I don't have anything in common with today's Democratic Party anymore, or people who've already made that decision to leave the Democratic Party and are trying to navigate their way through this election cycle. And so the call to action and some of the feedback that I've gotten from those who've read the book is, even as I write about some very serious problems and challenges that we're facing that pose a threat to our fundamental principles that make us who we are as a country, the end of the book is that issues a call to action for every American, not Democrats, Republicans, Independents, but every American, to recognize the responsibility that our founders placed in us, we the people, to defend freedom, to save our democracy, to make sure we have a government of, by, and for the people. And what I have heard from those who've read the book is that they are taking seriously the challenges that we face, but are leaving feeling hopeful at the end of the book because of that recognition that all is not lost, the damage that's been done is not irreparable, and that the way that we save our country, the way that we fix what is so broken, is when we stand up and take ownership of our responsibility and take our power seriously and hold those who are abusing their power accountable. And that's what we've got to do in this election.
You almost anticipated my next question. I just read a great piece by the great Victor Hanson Davis called The End of Everything. And I hear these draconian predictions, ironically, from both sides. Those who say if Joe Biden is reelected, it will be the end of democracy. Others who say, which I, of course, disagree with, that if Donald Trump is elected, it will be the end of democracy. You obviously don't believe that this is just rhetoric. You really do believe, as I think I do, that our constitutional freedoms really are in peril.
I do, and it's not just a matter of my opinion or your opinion, Roger. The evidence proves our position to be true and factual. When you take people's different feelings and emotions about President Biden or President Trump off the table, and you just look at the facts, because this is the first time in my lifetime, I think maybe only the second time in history, where we've had two people running for president who both have served as president and have a record that we can examine. The Democrat elite, no matter how often they say that President Trump is going to be the end of democracy as we know it, the facts and his record do not prove that to be true. Conversely, when you look at what the Biden administration is doing, how they are suppressing free speech in the name of protecting us from so-called misinformation or disinformation or hate speech, when really all they're doing is suppressing the speech of those who oppose them politically or who say things that they don't like. When you look at the weaponization of our Department of Justice to go after political opponents, foremost of which is Donald Trump, President Biden's opponent, but also everyday Americans who dare to stand up, peaceful pro-life protesters, parents who go and protest at a Board of Education meeting. These people are not committing crimes. They're exercising their right to free speech, the freedom of expression that's guaranteed in the First Amendment. The list goes on, and we don't have enough time to go through these examples, but these examples are some of the ones that I cite in my book to prove that point, because we could argue back and forth one opinion versus another, which is what our free speech protects our ability to do. But the facts, again, prove that the Biden-Harris administration and their cabal of woke warmongers are the ones who, not in theory, but in action, are destroying our democracy and undermining our free speech. And they are trying to cloak that in their rhetoric, in distraction and deflection tactic, in accusing Donald Trump of doing that.
Very well said. Again, folks, the name of the book is For Love of Country, Leave the Democrat Party Behind by Tulsi Gabbard. She has cover notes from individuals as diverse as Tucker Carlson, Pete Hegseth, who Army veteran, Bronze Star recipient with Fox News, Meghan McCain, Joe Rogan. Folks, this is a terrific book, and I strongly urge you to grab it. It really tells you the process that Tulsi Gabbard has gone through in making the decisions about how she was going to move forward to best serve her country. You know, look, I'm a political animal. I love politics. I have to admit to you that I didn't pay as much attention to your political career when you were a Democrat as perhaps I should have. But then I saw your debate with Kamala Harris, who was then running for president, and I thought it was one of the great pieces of political history that I had seen. Let's roll that, if we may.
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Senator Harris, your response.
As the elected Attorney General of California, I did the work of significantly reforming the criminal justice system of a state of 40 million people, which became a national model for the work that needs to be done. And I am proud of that work. And I am proud of making a decision to not just give fancy speeches or be in a legislative body and give speeches on the floor, but actually doing the work of being in the position to use the power that I had to reform a system that is badly in need of reform. That is why we created initiatives that were about reentering former offenders and getting them counseling.
The bottom line is, Senator Harris, when you were in a position to make a difference and an impact in these people's lives, you did not. And worse yet, in the case of those who were on death row, innocent people, you actually blocked evidence from being revealed that would have freed them until you were forced to do so. There is no excuse for that. And the people who suffered under your reign as prosecutor, you owe them an apology.
Well, you are a brawler. There's no question about that. And the fact that you came back is amazing. The context here, which I think people need to understand, is that earlier in the campaign, Kamala Harris had criticized Joe Biden because, as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, he had written the 1994 crime bill, which codified the harsh mandatory penalties for the first time nonviolent crime of possession of small amounts of drugs for personal use, which has been used disproportionately, I believe, to convict and incarcerate black people and poor people. This is I've written a lot about this. So the irony of Kamala Harris criticizing Joe for that, when in fact her record as a prosecutor in California showed her essentially carrying out that same legal philosophy. Extraordinarily hypocritical, in my view.
And the hypocrisy continues, Roger. I couldn't agree with you more. She is someone who says one thing and holds herself to one standard and holds other people to a different standard and makes her decisions based on what's going to get her some extra political points, which is why Again, when we look to the choice before us in this upcoming election, we all have to recognize that a vote for President Biden is a vote for a President Kamala Harris. It's just a matter of time, and how dangerous she would be if allowed to be in that position as president and commander-in-chief. You look at what she did when she had that opportunity to bring about positive change in a high-level position for the state of California. Imagine what she would do as president and commander-in-chief with the most powerful military at her fingertips. How would she try to project her so-called strength to cover up her own insecurity and weakness? This is something I've warned the American people about for many, many years, including when I was still a Democrat serving in Congress, because it's real to me as not only an American, but as a soldier, a veteran, someone who continues to serve our country in uniform in the Army Reserve. It is, and this view is not something that is isolated to me. I can't even tell you how many of my friends that I serve with who share this same view, and those who serve in some of the most elite units within our country's military. So we've got to understand the seriousness on so many levels of this upcoming election, which is why, Roger, as you know, I just got off a plane, and I'll be on another plane in a couple of days. I'm committed to spending every day and every effort possible between now and Election Day to warn the American people about the threats that the Biden-Harris administration poses, and why, even as we may disagree on one issue or another issue, or how we tackle immigration or how we tackle health care in this country, we must stand together as Americans who cherish peace, who cherish freedom, and do our part to remove from office those who have brought us to the brink of World War III and nuclear war, and who are undermining our fundamental rights and freedoms enshrined in the Constitution.
We have just a few more minutes before our commercial break, and then we're going to come back and finish with you. We'll talk a little politics, but a quick question, and that is your views on whether we should continue funding the war in Ukraine.
We should not. And the reason is more and more people are being killed. The longer the U.S. continues to shoulder the vast majority of the funding for this proxy war against Russia, as well as the fact that we are continuing to undermine our own national security interests by heightening tensions with a country in Russia that has more nuclear weapons than any other country in the world, the United States included. Putin has recently talked about and has scheduled tactical nuclear weapons drills and has made very clear that his use of nuclear weapons is not off the table. If he faces an existential threat, he will not hesitate to use those, sparking off a nuclear war that could very likely end in nuclear Armageddon, not just for us, but for the world. What should have happened, and this has been my consistent position from before this war kicking off, and certainly after it did, there needs to be a negotiated end to this war. Parties involved need to come to the table, and the President of the United States should have been the one, and should still be the one, to exercise our leverage to make that happen. Their failure to do so, and the Biden administration's actively blocking other countries attempting to bring about peace between Russia and Ukraine, to me is unconscionable, and something that we as Americans should hold him and Biden and his administration to account for.
Very, very well put. Once again, folks, if you're just tuning in, I'm talking to Tulsi Gabbard, former Democrat member of Congress, now an independent. She is out with an incredible new book, For Love of Country, Leave the Democrat Party Behind. It is now number 4 on the New York Times best-selling list. As I mentioned earlier, sold out at the local bookstore here. I really think the book is doing extraordinarily well. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and then we'll be back with Tulsi Gabbard to wrap it up and maybe talk a little politics. So don't touch that dial, folks. We're going to be right back with Tulsi Gabbard.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks, on this special Memorial Day edition of the Roger Stone Show. We are privileged to have with us former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, now an independent. She's the author of a hot new book, For Love of Country, Leave the Democrat Party Behind. And now we come down to the inevitable discussion of politics. Tulsi, you have said in a number of interviews that if you were called upon, you would be willing to serve as a vice presidential candidate for President Donald Trump, whose views at this time, I think, more closely align with yours. I find that idea very intriguing. I've talked about it quite a bit on my own shows, as well as a number of other shows. It's a long odyssey from running as a Democrat for president to being considered to be vice president. Give us some insight into your thinking.
Roger, I've dedicated my entire adult life to serving our country. That is my goal, and that is my mission. We've got an opportunity here now, given all of the things that we've talked about, the threats that we face, the frustrations that so many Americans have on everything, whether it's border security, to the continued inflation in our economy, to the problems with our education system, to the challenges we face in our foreign policy, with multiple wars either being waged or bubbling up in different regions of the world. This opportunity comes for us as Americans to be able to unite around our fundamental principles enshrined in the Constitution. I'm reaching out to all of those who feel politically homeless, who don't quite know what to do, to encourage them to join us in defending freedom, to join us in this cause of saving our country. If I have the opportunity to serve our country as President Trump's vice president or as his running mate, I would look forward to being able to bring about that change, to bring about that healing of the divide, to save our democracy, and to protect our country from facing the precipice or standing on the precipice of nuclear Armageddon.
Well, as President Richard Nixon once said to me, nobody runs for vice president. It is unseemly. I think you have handled yourself very, very well by making your availability known, but not openly campaigning for the job. I think it would bind up the country. It would be a national unity ticket. I like the idea. There are other candidates who I admire as well, potential candidates, but I think the idea from a political point of view is extraordinarily intriguing. The number of undecideds is very small. I think this is going to be a very close election. I think President Trump has to continue to make inroads into some key Democratic voting groups by tradition. That seems to be happening among African Americans, among Hispanic Americans, and so on. Frankly, we could do better among women voters. I think that's another thing that you obviously bring to the ticket. So let me thank you for joining us today, this very Memorial Day edition of the Roger Stone Show. Folks, once again, this great book, For Love of Country, Leave the Democrat Party Behind. You can grab it anywhere that books are sold. My very special thanks to Tulsi Gabbard for joining us on the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you so much, Roger. It's great to speak with you. Aloha.
Thank you so much. All right, folks, that was Tulsi Gabbard. On this Memorial Day weekend, I want to express to you how deeply grateful I am to be a part of the 77 WABC radio family. It is a great pleasure and honor to be here with you every Sunday to talk about my two favorite subjects, politics and food. In the interests of having Tulsi Gabbard for as long as we could, I dispensed with giving my weekly recipe from my mother's recipe book, but we're going to come back to it next week. I promise you that. In the meantime, I want to ask you one more time, do not miss the opportunity to download the 77 WABC radio app. That way you won't miss any of the incredible programming that we have here at 77 WABC. This is, folks, the most powerful, influential AM radio station on the face of the planet. If you don't live in the greater New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area, and you can't get us at 770 on the AM dial, it's amazing to me how far north of New York City the signal does go. You can always hear us at WABCRadio.com. We are live streaming worldwide. I think it's 173 countries around the world can hear the show here, but you can hear it without fail by please downloading the 77 WABC radio app to your very own phone. At this point, folks, I want to wish you a happy, healthy, and safe Memorial Day, but don't touch that dial because my friend Joe Piscopo is going to be right along with Sundays with Sinatra. God bless you.